morning. Hi guys, we're just making sure everyone can find us. And then we'll get started with the session. Just sit tight for 1 second. I'm going to give people a couple of minutes to find us. And as we get started here, if you want to introduce yourself in the comment box, we will say hello. We like to know who we're talking to in the morning. And we're just going to give it a couple more minutes to have people find us. Everyone, I hope it's fine. There we go. Good morning, Carol. How's it going? Hi, Ray. Yeah, let us know where you are in Texas. It's always kind of fun to see how many people and how far we're reaching across the state. So say hi. Don't be shy, and we'll get started here. Just give us 1 more minute. Corpus Christi. A couple of people in Corpus Christi. Okay. So I just shared the link, by the way, to the article that we're going to be talking about in the comment section. So if you don't know, we had published this article. At least now you can refer back to it as we get started on the discussion today. Looks like Ray and Reba know each other. McAllen, great. Okay. Give us like 1 more minute. I'm just going to make sure I shared the link in our event page, and I want to make sure that people found us. All right, guys. Good morning. How's it going? Just in case you missed the start of the video, as we get started here today, go ahead and introduce yourselves in the comment section so that we can say hello and know who we're talking to. And we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Christine Anderson. I am the Public Affairs and Communications Manager for the Real Estate Commission, and I'm joined this morning with our very own General Counsel, Chelsea Buckles, who is here and wonderfully joining us, taking time out of her morning to answer our questions. So, and on the side, we have our Enforcement Director, Mark Moore, here also answering questions about this. So we have all the key people here to make sure that you guys are on the right track when it comes to these this pay-to-play topic. So just in case you have not attended one of these sessions, you can post your questions over on the right-hand side in the comments section as we go, and I'll be monitoring those comments throughout the session. So we'll be able to answer your questions as we go. Chelsea's going to go over the article, the topic, the rule change, and then we'll kind of get into answering your questions and get into more specifics as we go along. But thank you so much for taking some time out this morning to join us. And like I said, please post your questions as much as you can, and we're going to go ahead. I'm going to turn it over to Chelsea to get started this morning.
Well, good morning. Thank you for joining us. It's an honor to be with you via Facebook. I wanted to do a short introduction. I've done one of these before. I have been with Trek now for about 6 months, so not very long.
You're a seasoned veteran.
I'm seasoned.
Yes.
I came into the rulemaking process for these rules, which are 535.148 and 535.220, midstream. They had been, I think they were proposed maybe my 6th day of work, something like that. And then they were adopted at our August meeting. This is a subject matter that took me a while to wrap my brain around. It's a rule with many exceptions, and so I know that is true for many of y'all, that it's a rule that's kind of hard to follow. So I've got a few little caveats that I wanted to mention before I really get started, and that is I don't have all the answers, but I sure will try. Any answers I don't have, I'm happy to circle back. an answer for you. We do have a general counsel inbox, and so if you want to email us at generalcounsel@trek.texas.gov.
Is it general.counsel?
I think there's a dot in between general and counsel. Then I can answer your very specific questions that relate to a specific preferred provider list or website you want me to look at. Happy to do that. Also, this bleeds into advertising just a little bit, and that's another set of rules that I find hard to wrap my brain around, in that have a lot of exceptions.
Advertising never has any questions.
No, none at all.
No.
So I want to stay limited today on the pay-to-play rules, and if you have any advertising questions, I'm happy to wade through those rules with you, but I'd like to do that just over on the general counsel email box. So with that, let's talk about the changes. The changes are primarily found in 535.148. And I think it's important to note where these changes originated, and that is that they were requested by the inspectors. The advisory group that oversees inspectors asked for these changes, and that is because there has long been a rule, 535.220, for inspectors that prohibit them from paying to receive access to really pay for referrals. But the same is not true on the other end. So there were brokerages asking them to pay to be on preferred provider lists, and there was some question about whether or not they could do that because of 535.220. So what this does is really make for an equal playing field. It prohibits the paying or receiving of funds for the access to those brokerages on both sides between all settlement service providers. So from a broad standpoint, what this rule does is it really strengthens provider independence, and it also clarifies consumer protection issues. It's not new in that we have long had a fiduciary duty to your client. That's not a new thing. And this basically expands on that or clarifies that point to some extent. So you must represent the interests of your client, and you can place no personal interest above your client's interest. So this rule really digs deep into that overarching cornerstone of our industry. Overarching cornerstone? I think a cornerstone would not be necessarily overarching.
Keystone?
Things to think about. So what is pay-to-play? We'll start high level. It's the access to a brokerage and to one's sales agents by paying to be included in something like a preferred provider program, or simply paying for referrals. So the changes to the TREC rules really prohibit these payments between settlement service providers. What's a settlement service provider, you may be asking?
I was about to say.
A settlement service provider is a person or a company that provides a settlement service. And what are those settlement services? Those are mostly services that are occurring at or before the purchase of a home. Services provided by a real estate agent, an inspector, a title company, mortgage lenders, appraisers, those types of things. They're not services that are provided typically after the purchase of a house, like moving expenses, contractors, alarm companies, things like that.
Okay.
So it's entities providing a settlement service. The definition of that really comes from federal law, what we call RESPA. And while we are not trying to extend that federal law, our motivation is simply in protecting that fiduciary duty.
Yeah.
It definitely stems from federal law.
Okay.
So the rule prohibits the paying or receiving of funds between settlement service providers. And this comes up primarily when you're paying for a referral, most often from being on a preferred provider list. Well, there's a lot of preferred provider lists out there. So is it okay to have one? That's the big fat question that even came up in our commission meeting when the rules were being adopted. What about my preferred provider list? Well, you can have one, but you can't, and I'm going to warn you, I'm going down this kind of Christmas tree of assessment. You can have one, but you can't charge a settlement service provider to be included in that list.
So the list of people that you were saying happened before,
you can't include those unless there's an unless. It's made clear on the face of that list that it is for a promotional advertising or for educational activities. And that promotional advertising must be paid for at market rates. So the real point to this is that if you have a preferred provider list that that is a form of advertising, then there must be great clarity that that list is based on the payment of funds for purposes of advertising and not on the performance of those settlement service providers.
So some sort of disclaimer on it saying something like, we were paid for.
Those providers listed below have paid for advertising and are not listed or ranked based on their performance or service standards.
Right.
And that needs to be very, very clear.
Okay.
So full disclosure and clarity is the key. You need to be asking yourself, is it clear to the consumer what is happening here? Does it look and feel like a recommendation? Well, then it better be free.
Okay.
Does it look and feel like an advertisement? You need to make that very clear.
Okay. I mean, this makes sense.
Yes, and it really provides for great independence to simply take care of your client and not get into the confusion of, what are we doing here? Are we advertising? Are we recommending? It keeps the lines clean, maybe is better way of saying.
So do you think that some of the confusion might be the definition of a service provider and what
who and who isn't a service provider?
Yeah,
maybe. I think license holders often will need to recommend services of others. That's just kind of part of this process.
Yeah.
And those will naturally include settlement service providers and others.
Right. So if if an agent just, for example, doesn't have a list, but has, let's say I'm a client and I'm in the process of getting an inspection and I need an inspector, are they allowed to provide three inspectors, not in like a formal list, but just like send me a list of inspectors? And then let's say those inspectors, do they pay? Can they pay to be in that list? Or do they then, when they provide that email to me saying like, hey, here's a list of 3 inspectors that you should use, is that when they need to disclose that?
That needs to be made very clear. And if I am the client and you are a license holder and I say I need a list of 3 inspectors, and then you send me a list of 3 inspectors, that looks and feels like a recommended list of inspectors.
Right.
And if there's no money exchanged between you and those 3 inspectors, you're golden. That's just part of what you do in your job. But if you receive money for those recommendations, that needs to be part of a promotional advertising scheme that is documented to the client.
Okay. So in the email saying, hey, these people have contacted me, I don't know anything about them, but they wanted me to tell you about them. Here they are. Is that, I could see that happening, and in the quick pace of a transaction, not having a formal list anymore, but having just, hey, these people I know have reached out to my office and they say they're working in the neighborhood and available. And whether or not they've paid, the agent doesn't disclose.
Then that's a violation.
There you go. Yeah. And I think that's common and not intended to be misleading, just maybe.
Really, the way to avoid that is to not take money for things like that.
Right. I think that's where we're going.
That's exactly right. Don't take money for things like that. You keep your business model very simple.
Right. Keep your business model simple. I like it. So if a moving company, though, after, you don't need to worry about that.
No, I still don't think it's a good idea, but with this not part of what we regulate.
Okay. So Oh, let's see. We have some questions. Okay. Is there a standard wording you can give for this disclosure that we're talking about?
I'm happy to. I looked at one just the other day, and we deemed it to be in full compliance. And so I'm happy to. In fact, I'll read you the language that I saw the other day.
And then I'll also share it in this comment section, and we'll repost it.
That's great. And this was just someone else's language. This is nothing that I crafted as perfection, but I have deemed it to be appropriate. This was for a list of inspectors, and so it's specific to inspectors. And this was one that had had a ranking of providers. It was like gold, silver, platinum. And we talked about this in the article, and I will mention here that, again, if that ranking system exists in your provider list, you can do that, but it needs to be made clear that the ranking is based on how much a settlement service provider paid, not a ranking of their services.
Yeah, not how great they are at doing an inspection, but more how much money they paid you to be on the advertisement. Okay.
So that the language that I have is inspectors listed below are categorized solely based on sponsorship level of a paid advertising plan to include access or benefits to our license holders, and are not ranked based on performance or service standards. So that makes it clear that they've paid to be included in an advertising list at some level, gold, silver, platinum, and it's not based on their performance.
So could they include that in an email, or does it need to be like a formal, like brochure type thing?
That's a question on whether or not an email is considered advertising.
I mean, if they're sending an email to their client, and the client, that's how they're communicating with their client, and they get this list, can they attach that to that email and say, this is me disclosing? Because, I mean, in an email, they're disclosing their IABS and consumer notice, and that's considered, as long as it's filled out correctly, which we've covered, is that...
I'm going to reserve the right to figure that one out.
Okay, that's
because
fine.
So the exception for promotional advertising, therefore being able to receive payment at market rates for those, that exception is limited to advertising. And so an email between your client and you, I don't see as advertising, but I want to double check what our rules say about that. So I don't think that would be allowed, because I think it would, number one, I think it's awkward. Hey, here's a list of 3, but by the way, these people paid for me to tell you that. I just think that probably comes up less.
Yeah.
But I don't think that falls within our advertising exception. So I think when you have a situation like that, you make recommendations based on the performance that you know about, who you've used in the past, right. Some basis like that, and not because someone paid you. Would you agree, Mark?
Okay. We have a consensus there. So hopefully, Ray, that answered your question, and I will post that language here in the chat after we're done, and I will repost it on our Facebook page, and maybe even add it to the article so that y'all have that for reference later. But I hope that answers your question. And then I say, what if the brokerage receives monies and is not directly paid to the agent giving the list? So the brokerage got the money, but the agent didn't get the money. Is that how does that work? Well, ultimately, yeah, it's the same. The agent works for the brokerage.
Yeah. If the brokerage is receiving money, then that is as if the agent is as well.
Right. So short answer is they still need to disclose. Do I need to disclose in writing that a lender advertises, pays me a portion of his total to clients that I refer the lender to? I do verbally. So she's saying, she verbally says, hey, this lender and I work together. We have a partnership, but he's great. Because I feel like that's like a normal thing for an agent to say to a client.
If you're receiving funds for that, then that requires full disclosure and informed consent, right?
Yep.
That would need to be in writing, not just a verbal conversation.
So it sounded to me like the 2 attorneys in this room are saying, write everything down, make it clear, put it in a clear way to send it to your clients, and don't deviate from that so that you don't cause confusion. You don't open yourself up to a problem.
Mark Moore says his mantra is full disclosure, informed consent. Those two things. I think those are two good things to remember.
Okay.
And that saves your client too. If they understand what's going on, and they provide you with written consent for doing whatever, that gets you probably 85% down the line.
Yeah. So Juan says, I've heard of third parties sponsoring broker websites. So this would fall under the disclosure stated. I think, Juan, the question is, who is the third party that's sponsoring the website? And my first question would be, is that a closing person, like somebody involved in the closing?
Sponsoring a website. Okay. I probably need to look at that and see exactly what that would look like. But if you're sponsor, I'm guessing that means you have an advertisement on a website, and that would just fall under the advertising rules.
Yeah. All right. Hopefully, Juan, that helps. If you want to clarify your question, if we didn't answer it, go ahead and just comment there so that I know.
Yeah. And if it's not a pay-to-play question, then just email me, general.counsel@trek.texas.gov. We can talk through it.
If realtors are using, so Kim says, if realtors are using a certain lender in their advertising, should there be a disclosure in the advertising, even if they are not receiving a payment?
So a lender is advertising for free? You're not charging for that advertising?
Says if realtors are using a certain lender in their advertising, should there be a disclosure? I think that's what she's saying, even if they're not receiving payment.
I think there may be a little confusion about what receiving payment is. If you're receiving payment for an advertisement, then that's that's payment.
Yeah.
So it's not a separate payment. It's not like out of closing expenses or something like that.
Yeah, you don't get like a percentage of the closing.
Yeah, if you're getting paid to advertise, then it needs to be made. I mean, if we're talking about a preferred provider list and paying for a referral, then we're talking about pay to play, and that is you can only do that if you have a disclosure. Otherwise, it falls into the category of advertising.
Yes, which again, maybe we need to have another session on advertising. It sounds like. No. We will, but we'll give Chelsea plenty of time to prep for
I'll
that
just
one.
study that one.
Yeah. So it says, and Kim, again, if we didn't get to your point, if you want to clarify there, I'd be happy to answer your question. Gayla says, what about if a vendor is required to pay the brokerage in order to have freedom to attend all office meetings, events, and certain other liberties in the office? To clarify, this is not my office, just interested to know the answer. So she's saying if a vendor, but they're not trying to advertise to the clients, they're just trying to advertise to the other agents, Gayla, and that's my question is like, are they trying to get access to the agents?
Yeah, it sounds like it sounds like access to a brokerage. So it would stem on, and Mark helped me with this one, I just want to give credit where credit is due, that would hinge on what type of vendor it is. Is it a settlement service provider? If it is, then it falls under pay to play.
Yeah. All right.
And playing in that instance would be going to those office meetings and having access that would then encourage those at the meeting to use that specific vendor.
Yeah.
Right?
So again, just disclosing every time when you refer somebody to a settlement service provider, this person paid us to do this.
And I'll reiterate that the idea of paying for vendors to attend office meetings is not a best practice. Your best practice is not to charge for things like that.
Yeah.
Don't charge. And if you do charge, disclose.
Okay. So Juan is referring back to his first question. He's saying, so Juan's saying that the third party, the sponsoring the websites, he's saying are lenders.
Okay.
Yeah. So I still think that falls under advertising more so than pay to play.
Right. I agree.
But Juan, again, if you have a very specific question, I bet you Chelsea would be more than happy to answer via email. Sometimes it's hard to not have the full scope of what you're presenting, and if we don't know exactly what you're trying to get at, it's hard to answer that question. But I think that falls just under general advertising disclosures. And then yes, or even they're splitting the payment. Kim BB is referring to her questions. So if realtors are using a certain lender in their advertising, should they disclose in the advertising, even if they're not receiving payment? And then she says yes, or even if they're splitting the payment.
Which is getting paid.
Yeah, they're getting paid. So yes, disclose it.
Same.
I wonder how many times we're going to say the word disclose in this session.
We should have counted.
Yeah. So to home warranty companies and inspectors, Gayla was referring to her question. What about if the vendor is required to pay to the brokerage? So you're saying home warranty companies and inspectors. Those are, again,
settlement service providers.
Yeah. So they do need to be disclosed.
Your settlement service provider, I think your simplest test is, are they a provider of service that occurs during the home purchase or sales process?
The escrow period, the closing process.
From offer to close.
Yeah. Before you get your check.
Right.
Okay. So Kristen Parker says, basically, this is RESPA rules that are new at the state level.
You're right. So we did not mirror RESPA exactly. They definitely are in line with RESPA, but there's a lot of RESPA dribbled in this. And it was not our intention to just extend federal law. There's no reason for us to be the enforcers of federal law. There's a whole entity that does that at the federal level. But we are the entity that oversees our license holders' ability to protect one's fiduciary duty. And this falls squarely in the fiduciary duty camp.
Yeah, I feel like the expectation as a consumer working with one of our license holders to trust that the license holder is referring them to not the person that paid the most, but the person that is going to provide them the best services.
That's right.
In a very vulnerable state where you as a consumer buying a house may not know or be an expert in a topic.
And you don't have access to these service providers. Who should I use? I don't know. Who should I use? And if the answer to that question is based on who paid, and that is not disclosed, that's a problem.
Yeah. I think the how it's delivered and everything is going to be the confusion there. So again, I think what I'm hearing is if you have somebody that's paying you to be referred to in a transaction, that needs to be disclosed that they paid. Right. And that needs to be clearly disclosed in writing,
right? Not
in a phone call, not on an email, but in writing, given to the client. And how would they, let's say they do receive a complaint about, does enforcement how would we enforce any of this? What's the next step in this process?
Well, our enforcement is primarily complaint driven. So it would be based on receiving a complaint, and then that would be investigated.
Yeah.
This is definitely, I say this is new territory. We do a lot of investigations on violating one's fiduciary duty, and this would be a similar type investigation, if not the exact same.
Yeah.
But it would just be based on a complaint and then an investigation.
So consumer uses an inspector on a list, and the inspector does the job. They go through closing, and it comes through that the inspector didn't follow the standards of practice and missed a bunch of stuff. The house is falling down, and they file a complaint. Would it have to be the person filing the complaint knowing that this was not disclosed, or would maybe our enforcement division see when you referred this person to this inspector, did you tell them that this inspector paid you to be referred to? I wonder how that,
That's a good question. It would not be unusual, and Mark can correct me if I'm wrong, for a complaint to come in and it not be specific to a rule violation.
Right.
But then once an investigation occurs,
they see
other rule violations or different rule violations even.
Yeah.
And so we could enforce 535.148 even if a complaint didn't come in saying somebody violated 535.148, because that really
what
happens.
consumer's going to do that. So in conclusion for this, simple takeaways. What do you want to make sure if everyone, all of the people attending this today, they walk away from, what do you want to make sure is clear?
If you have a preferred provider list, that includes settlement service providers. It needs to be clear on its face whether or not you are paid for entities to be included on that preferred provider list. I've seen several websites that have kind of categories, like you'd pull down a menu and you'd look for home inspectors, or you'd look for some other settlement service provider, and at the top of every page needs to say, these entities paid for this, for the inclusion to be on this list. This is not based on their performance. That disclosure that we talked about needs to be very clear on its face.
Yeah.
Because primarily we are here to protect the consumer, and a consumer needs to have clear understanding of why you're doing what you're doing. Are you doing this to recommend someone specific? Well, then great. Don't charge for that. If you're doing this for advertising, then the consumer needs to be aware.
Okay. So that's included on, that's something new. That's included on websites when you have a list, or if it's a paper form that they're giving somebody.
That's right. Lists of all types.
All lists. Anytime it's written down, they need to make sure that that's on there.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a list that's an advertisement, right?
Right.
I mean, if it's just a recommendation list, that's not what this is, and don't charge for those recommendations. If so, then it better look like advertising. I mean, we can go in this circle.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think most people these days, they send an email and there's no intent to be misleading. And maybe the agents don't even know that the reason that they have this list of 5 inspectors is because their broker but that's when the broker responsibility comes in too, and make sure that the agent is educated on how to disclose that list of those service
that's
providers.
right. Well, and if a broker has that list, it needs to be on its face, which would then make it clear to a sales agent, right? Yeah. I started this with keep a simple business model. That'll keep you out of trouble.
Yeah. So Steve Rogers asked one more question. Also, Captain America is attending this session. I'm sure you've never heard that, Mr. Rogers, so sorry about that. But can vendors pay a fee to speak at meetings of licensees in order to promote their services to licensees where no referral to clients is involved? And I think we kind of touched on that earlier.
Yeah, PaytoPlay is really surrounded around referrals. I think we talked about this before, and we really landed on, is the vendor a settlement service provider? If so, then that's access to brokerage. But it does kind of hinge on whether or not there's a referral involved. If there's no expectation of a referral, then I think you're fine. You agree, Mark?
Education on services, like
I would be a little hesitant to believe that there is a scenario where a brokerage is charging for vendors who are settlement service providers to attend a meeting, and there is no expectation of referral. Well, then why would the vendor pay for that?
Right.
I mean, that just doesn't make much sense. So
I mean, it doesn't make business sense, no.
Yeah, I mean, just to make more friends, it doesn't.
Yeah, that seems odd. So, okay. Well, Steve, I hope that answers your question. Mitch asked one more question. What if a vendor just pays for lunch?
I think it would really hinge on if there's
intent for referral.
Right. And
so,
why are you paying for lunch if you're not expecting something in exchange?
So like Gracie Title comes in and buys lunch for everyone at the Keller Williams office and says, we're just doing this out of the kindness of our hearts. Well, is it really?
Well, let's go back to the 2 exceptions. There's an exception for promotional advertising at market rates, and also for educational activities.
Right.
So that may be an instance where it's an educational activity.
Yeah. So Gracie Title is going in to pay lunch, but they're also going to, refer them and say, this is an opportunity to teach you guys about a new product that'll help you guys get to closing faster.
Right.
Whatever XYZ product
I think that's
is.
probably our educational. exception.
But again, if Gracie Title then, is the only only title company you guys ever refer anyone to, it could be questioned that like all this education related stuff, is the brokerage doing this pay to play process indirectly?
Yeah, and you probably want to vary that to avoid the exclusivity factor, but that's not part of this rule.
Yeah, okay, good. So I thought lenders were not allowed to pay referral fees to realtors.
Lenders are not allowed to pay referral fees to lenders. I think that's right.
So lenders are not allowed to pay referral fees, Suzette, to realtors.
Does that sound right to you?
That's a good question. You know what, Suzette? If you could just send us that question via email at general.counsel@trec.texas.gov, it'll be helpful for us to get you the specifics on that. And then for the rest of the people in attendance, what I'll try to do is when we get that answer, I can publish it here in the comment section when the video is republished on our page. And then looks like, does this also go for vendors paying for or part of agents' lead services, Zillow and et cetera?
That is different. I would need to look into that.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know, but lead services is very different than what we're talking about here, kind of the payment for referrals for other settlement service providers.
Yeah.
But I need to look into that. That's a really great question.
And again, what we can do, guys, is these questions that we're unable to answer, if you can send them to us directly, I will have Chelsea commit here and now that she will answer the questions as she can, and then I will try to repost them here for the group. And then if there seems to be more clarification, or like I said, maybe another advertising session we do, that's kind of how these things evolve, is we retouch on topics as these conversations get started. So if we need to, we'll come back and clarify things. But I will also post the answer here in the comment section as we go. So I think what I hear today is, if you have a list of providers, closing settlement, what was it? Settlement service providers.
There you go.
Settlement service providers. Got it. If we have a list of settlement service providers, that's anyone that works on the transaction before close, inspectors, anything like that, even plumbers that might be doing a post-inspection kind of.
I would not put them in that category.
Okay.
I need to double check plumbers, but that's I wouldn't put them, or even like engineers, work being done as a result of an inspection before close. That's not what we're talking about here.
Okay, so so anyone that is considered that type of provider before close, they need to have written disclosure that the agent, broker, whomever, because ultimately it's still the brokerage, but the agent's still required to disclose this. This notice saying, we were paid for this. Yep, we were paid for this. Here's the list of the people that we're recommending.
That's right. And it needs to be part of either a promotional advertising scheme that is at market rates, or an educational activity. If it doesn't fall within one of those two things, you cannot pay for that type of access. It's prohibited.
Okay. So and by promotional marketing scheme, you're saying the advertising of these people.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So hopefully that answers the questions that you guys may have. Oh, wait, what about getting thank you gift or any other gifts at the end of the year from a service provider? So maybe not payment, but they're getting gifts.
I think this falls within the $50 limit?
Yeah. I would think that falls within, but again, I don't know. I mean, has the type of payment been defined within this rule?
I think we say valuable consideration, right? So any valuable consideration. In other rules, we talk about a gift of under $50 that is not cash value, like not a Visa gift card, then that's determined to be not valuable consideration.
Okay.
So I think you could probably use that rule. And then also who is giving and receiving. Is it between settlement service providers? If it's not, you're fine.
Okay. So I hope this helps, guys. We are kind of, Respite is, Stephanie's saying Respite lists anything of value as a payment.
I'll double check what our rule says. We say valuable consideration. I'm almost positive.
Yeah. So we might be slightly different. Again, Stephanie, what I'll do is I'll publish the answer to these questions, post the video being live, so that we can have this as a referral for other people that are reading this later. So it looks like I don't have any other questions as of now. I'll give you guys another second as I wrap up to post any other questions or comments. I just want to say thank you to Chelsea for being here this morning. She's a very busy lady, and I know all of you guys are very busy, and taking time out of your morning to get educated on a topic like this shows that you guys are on the right track and trying to be in compliance with everything we're doing. So we appreciate that. We like to do these videos for y'all so that you guys can get these answers directly and have a chance to talk with us, maybe if you can't come to Austin or to one of the times that we're out on the road. So if you have ideas for a future video or a rule that you need help with, or a topic that we should cover, I always encourage you to reach out to us either on Facebook. You can write to us directly. I actually manage our Facebook page myself. So I'm on there every day and answering questions. And so if you send me something there, I will definitely respond to you. You can also send me an email. My email address is christine.anderson@trek.texas.gov. And I will take that in and I'm kind of the person that helps facilitate all of the topics we cover throughout the agency. And so if something looks like a really good idea, I'd welcome the help to come up with more material for you guys so that our license holders can continue to provide excellent services to their clients. I just, again, thank you for attending and making these videos really successful. I hope it was helpful. Oh, wait, sorry, 1 second. FYI, I put in the buyer's agreement all of these disclosures. Great seminar. Yes, Greg, the video is recorded and I will have it posted here later. And then I also always post it on YouTube. So if you have friends or other license holders that don't have a Facebook account, you can share that YouTube video, and that way then they don't have to have a Facebook account. And
so that we're documented for all time.
All time.
Yay.
All the time. Everyone gets to see our faces. Oh, Kristen says unlicensed activity. So again, Kristen, that's a great topic, but like what exactly in unlicensed activity are you trying to get clarification on? What is unlicensed activity? When do we do something to enforce unlicensed activity? What do we have jurisdiction over? Those are all things that I've gotten questions over in just the last week. Somebody asked me about apartment association or apartment, big, large apartment complexes. And do we have jurisdiction over somebody that's a license holder that also works at an apartment complex? So we had to answer that question. So please send those questions. I love these videos. I think they're really helpful and we've had some great responses. So again, thank you so much for your time this morning. Thanks, Christine. Mark, even though he's off screen,
to be on camera.
He is also essential in this process. So we appreciate you taking your time this morning. And again, we'll see you next month. I think next month we'll be covering some of our future strategic planning goals. So that'll be a hot topic and good information. So we'll see you then. Thanks so much, guys.